now. So record. Check.
Do we want to do that so early and have those monstrously huge files going across the etherwebs?
Well, a couple minutes here and there doesn't really make much difference.
I know, I was just being stupid. Getting into my character for the show.
Oh, that's what you're doing. Okay.
Yes. But I am recording as well. My character.
Oh, that's what
But I am.
All right, that sounds fine to me.
good.
Anybody in the chat room? No. Nobody in the chat room. Nobody to care.
Wah wah. Sad trombone sound.
I do wish we could come up with something, though, to bump the numbers up.
It's worse. They're dropping. I ran a check today
are they?
for the first time in a while, and yeah.
Hey guys, Eric.
Let's see. We do have a voicemail to put in there. Whilst I'm thinking about it. Which means I'll need.
So how bad are they?
It's not terrible. It's just well, I don't really want to talk about it live.
Okay.
I don't want to talk about the numbers. But it's taking longer to get the same amount of traffic that we used to get. That's the easiest way to put it. We used to have more immediate response, and now we're getting roughly the same response just over the course of 2 or 3 weeks as opposed to downloaded immediately. And the downloaded immediately, those are the people who are subscribed and are getting it right then. The others come back, and listen over the web or whatever. So that means that the only way that could happen is that people have unsubscribed because we haven't changed the feed.
Right.
But I just that can't worry me. I'm going to do my show, and
That's right.
If people like it, great. I hope they do. But if they don't, I can't be anybody other than me, and they certainly won't like it if I'm pretending. So.
Yep.
All right. Okay, I think. Wait, I need. How am I going to do that? I'll play it over there, and I'll turn this up when the time comes. All right, that'll work.
You're
Riveting radio.
Okay.
The thing to the other thing.
And the other thing. Yes.
With the other thing.
All right. Let's do this thing. Recording there. Check. All right. And away we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to GeekRant, episode 236. Work It! Recorded May 8th, 2016, and brought to you by Element OP Productions. ElementOP.com. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the only show on the internet where geeks rant. Truly, we're the one. The only time. Nowhere else in the world do geeks say what they think, except here, I think. Don't quote me on that. I am your host, Mark, the Sultan of the Soapbox Cockerel, and joining me this week, as always, except last week, are your two stalwart co-hosts, Chris, the Command Line Godfather Neves, and Seth, the Gooey Kid Anderson. Hello, gentlemen.
Hey, Mark, and how goes things, Seth? I hope everyone had one heck of a week.
Hey, everybody. It is so awesome to be here. Thank you for showing up.
Happy Mother's Day. By the time you're listening to this, it is not Mother's Day, and in many countries, it's not Mother's Day anyway. But right now, as of today, May 8th, 2016, it's Mother's Day in the U.S. Happy Mother's Day, moms. I hope you got your free hug coupons from your kids.
Or whatever they ended up handing out.
Yes. School teachers, particularly elementary, they're always making handprints and footprint things, and so all kinds of stuff like that. For my wife's celebration, I took her to see a movie with muscly men in no shirts and tight pants, namely Civil War.
Aha.
So we got to see that yesterday. And of course, as always, I will give a spoiler-free review. The writing was okay. The story was okay. It's not as good as Winter Soldier. Not as good as Avengers. I think the Avengers is the highlight of Marvel right now. They're kind of stuck in this thing right now of having to introduce so many new characters to do all the new shows that they're going to do over the next decade.
Yeah.
Each show has become a prequel to every other show before it, and I think the writing is suffering for that. I will say my biggest disappointment in this one was the visual effects. They just weren't good. This
like
is
rushed.
I don't know, maybe for example, Avengers, going back to what I think is the pinnacle of it, the physics of those things, the stunts and all those things always looked right. You had to look really carefully to see that it wasn't CGI or that it wasn't a model to make the difference between this was a stuntman and this was CGI. This one, it was really obvious every time that it was CGI. There's a scene there, no spoilers here, Captain America, Winter Soldier are running in traffic, running as fast as cars, because those two guys can do that. And there's a way to do that right, and there's the way they did it in the movie. And it really looked just bad. It was so obvious, here's traffic, and here's superimposed people running on a blue screen that don't even look real on it.
Was it as bad as like Neo jumping on cars in whichever crappy Matrix sequel that was? You know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah. The thing is that should be so far in the past. That was 20 years ago, Seth. That should be so far in the past now that we shouldn't even be able to compare those two. But sadly, they are comparable. It was like the Spider-Man, the first 3 Spider-Man movies. You know how they did a good job with those, but the physics just didn't look quite right. He moved too fast. He moved too bouncy. I don't know. It just wasn't quite right.
Right.
And we're back to that level of CGI now. As guys are throwing around, superpower guys are throwing other superpower guys. Right? It's Civil War. It's superheroes fighting superheroes. And so you get a guy get hit and he flies back 20 yards, and that's the way things happen. They do the rope pull and whatever. But here, I guess they didn't do the rope pull. Instead, they said, we'll fix it in post. And it was obvious to me many times throughout the course of the 2.5-hour movie. Each time, it totally pulled me out of the movie. You may have a different experience, but for me, it was completely disruptive to the moment. And I was very disappointed by that.
Well, that's too bad. That's why I was wondering if it was like it was rushed, because it seemed like that movie was, the other ones just got over and they started pushing for the Civil War already. It's like, wow, that was a fast turnaround for movies to chain together like that.
And also because of the nature of the movie, again, superheroes fighting superheroes, all the action is more fantastic. So you take Winter Soldier, like the elevator scene where Cap is kicking butt in the elevator. That can all be done with stuntmen because it's hand-to-hand combat, a few wire pulls here and there, a few special effect shots, but mostly that's just stuntmen being really good at what they do. But when you have, Iron Man and Captain America both being super strong and super fast fighting each other, and again, no spoilers, it was in the previews, it's going to happen, everything is amped up. And so it's no longer stuntmen being good at what they do, it's special effects artists not given the time to be good at what they do. I don't know. So that, for me, was the most disappointing part about the whole experience.
That's too bad. I can understand having issues, but it's too bad that if the effects are what break it for people.
Again, they wasted Vision, but Marvel's been wasting Vision for decades. So I just need to get off of that high horse.
Yeah, he was wasted in the comics for years.
Right.
So it's only fair that they give him equal time on the screen.
Yeah, he's one of a handful of super characters that if they did him right, there would be no story, there would be no tension, there would be nothing. Like Dr. Manhattan was the same way. He's so powerful that there's kind of nothing you can do with him, so you have to waste him.
Yep. Or you nerf him like Superman.
Right. Well, Superman. Again, depending on which Superman you read, he's either the godlike character that can't be stopped, or he's just slightly stronger than a dude, and Batman can take him down.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in the movies, they made Iron Man far too strong. Because he just, I don't know, maybe after I got out of comic books after Onslaught, he would have never been able to stand up to Thor. One hit from Thor's hammer would have trashed Iron Man, and that would have been game over. So, they started off with Iron Man being far too strong, far too quickly in the movies to put him on par and made him basically God of the Marvel Universe. And anyway, that's my thoughts on that.
I think they painted themselves into a corner, and then now they're trying to get out of it and stepping all over everything they've already done.
And Captain America, I feel, is way too pumped up too. Again, it depends on which strain of the comic books you read. His strength varies over the course of his career, but starting really with Winter Soldier and continuing through Age of Ultron and now Civil War, he is Superman strength. He is that strong and that fast. And when you put him and Tony Stark fighting each other, which one wins, right? And this now you've got Captain America, the amped up Captain America, and the Winter Soldier, who apparently is every bit as strong as Captain America, which I don't really think that matches up either with my experience, but they say they do, and they're both going against Tony Stark. Again, no spoilers, it's in the previews. That should be a very quick battle, but instead it's nearly 20 minutes, maybe 15.
It just felt like 20. That says a lot about what you think about the movie.
And I don't want to come off saying I didn't enjoy it. I did. I walked away from it having enjoyed the experience, but let down because I know Marvel can do better because they have done better. I've seen them do better, so I know they can.
Right. Well, we'll see.
Is this one kicking off Phase 3, or has Phase 3 already started?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I will like the movie because I have pretty low expectations for Civil War, and my plan is to go watch it tomorrow night. So. Yeah,
and no Hulk, no Thor. A couple of passing mentions of the two of them, but again, going back to Avengers, that Hulk-Thor interplay was a good part of what made the battles interesting. That comic relief was there, and that when they worked together, and even when they were working together, weren't really working together. And that carried through a little bit into Winter Soldier, Age of Ultron, but not quite as much. And now they're both gone. Literally the two most powerful characters in the Avengers aren't there.
That's true.
Yeah, well, actually, Vision is the most powerful, but he's not given that strength. Whatever.
I think we're rabbit holing really bad here.
I don't want to come off as being totally negative because I enjoyed it, and when it comes on DVD, I'll buy it because I'm that guy. I'm gonna buy it, and I'll watch it again and again. I'm sure that I will enjoy it and will watch it, but I was disappointed at the same time. No.
Maybe it'll be different if you could watch them back to back.
Sure. Let's hold out hope.
I'm trying. Come on, give me something.
Well, I thought Age of Ultron suffered just the same. It's on par with Age of Ultron to me. And what I was hoping for was a redemption from Age of Ultron, and I didn't get it. I got another Age of Ultron. Another series of characters that were introduced but not developed. A villain, in this case, there's not really a villain, but super fight scenes that really didn't quite work right. Paul Rudd as Ant-Man shows up and is really the highlight of the movie, and that's an indictment, not a compliment.
That's pretty bad when Ant-Man is the highlight of the movie.
And Spider-Man. I do want to say this is the best Spider-Man I've seen on screen.
Really?
in my opinion, the most
Oh.
Spidey-ish Spider-Man that we've seen on screen. He's I don't, because it's such a golden treasure, I'm not going to say anything about it. But the time when he's in the movie were the best parts of the movie for me.
Okay.
Cool.
All right,
Looking
moving.
forward to when it comes here eventually someday.
You don't ever get anything first run out there?
Once in a blue moon we do.
Hmm.
Like Star Wars, we had opening night,
Okay.
but it ran for 3 weeks, something like that, in a single studio or a single movie theater.
Yeah, I saw where Deadpool's releases next week. That went from movie to DVD lightning speed.
Yeah, it did.
Have you been seeing the commercials for Deadpool? Ryan Reynolds, they've been knocking them out of the park. I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the commercials for it have been pretty good. Actually, it's available to purchase on Google Play right now. I just about pulled the trigger on it, but I don't know if I want to buy it digitally or just put it in my Plex later.
That'll come to me in a red envelope. But that's all I'm interested in for that particular one.
Yeah.
All right, Little Bit Zombie. Is that a new 5K, Seth?
No,
Okay.
this is it is a movie that is the perfect blend of lighthearted cheese. It's called Little Bit Zombie. It came out a few years ago. And one of the interesting things is he funded it. He did a crowdsource funding, so as the credits are rolling through, it gets like to the assistant producer, and it's like it goes on for like ever. But it's a funny take on zombie films. It's not really a zombie outbreak kind of thing, but it's a guy gets bit by a mosquito that had bit a zombie, and so he's slowly kind of becoming a zombie. But at the same time, they're at this cabin trying to plan his wedding with the bridezilla of a bride to be, and there's some seriously laugh out loud, super funny moments in it. It's not a bad movie that's funny. It's like a B movie that's freaking hilarious. They're a little over the top, but you can tell they play it that way. Lots of jokes, lots of geek stuff. Even bacon is prevalent in the movie. So Little Bit Zombie if you have a couple of hours and you don't know what to do on Netflix.
So it's on Netflix streaming.
It's either, I don't remember if I watched it on Netflix or Amazon, one of the two.
Okay.
I'm watching the trailer, and so far it seems to be pretty much the this layup of the obvious, bad movie start.
Well, like I say, I don't think this would qualify as a bad movie, but it's definitely a B movie. But it's cheesy. You can tell they're kind of over the top on purpose. It gives it that lighthearted feel, and it was super enjoyable.
Have you seen the 2013 movie Warm Bodies?
Warm. Is that the
No.
one where the guy becomes human again?
Well, spoiler alert. Yes.
I didn't know. So if that's the one, then yes, I saw it.
Yeah, it's I don't go into the zombie thing at all, but that movie was really good. It was a good movie that happened to have zombies in it.
Right.
And I really, it had some of my favorite actors in it. People that you don't know their names, but when you see them, you go, oh yeah, that guy. I know that guy. It was a movie full of that guys.
Right.
And really worth watching. Again, on Netflix. I recommend you check it out.
Yeah, that is a good movie.
Yeah, basically there's the typical zombie plague, and then the plague starts to end. I mean, you never see that happen, but that's the story of this whole movie, is that we're not really sure how it starts to happen, but something happens that causes the plague to like wear off. And so,
Interesting.
check it out. Dusting.
The only one I really care about this one is
Excellent.
that one.
I want to. That one is good one there because that got me too. It's the thing that I always tell people to do, and the thing that when I was maintaining other people's computers, I did all the time, but I never do myself, and it's bitten me. Dust your dang computer, people.
Yes. It's. I try to do it whenever we set the clocks back. I didn't do mine recently, and I don't know if you can hear the small jet engine roaring from the corner over here, but it's starting to get quite noisy. So it's just a good reminder to dust your computers before the computers bite the dust.
Yeah, just picture a nice, warm, fuzzy blanket of dust across all your heat-sensitive components. That's what's going on in there.
Yep.
And you may think you keep a clean house. Your computer says otherwise, because it's got this fan running 24/7, sucking every little thing into it.
And even if you have the filters, it won't matter.
It helps you keep a clean house.
Yes.
There you go.
It's like your own little Roomba that doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah. Most people pay thousands of dollars for those ion things that you have to clean with the big metal pieces that you have to clean. Your computer does it for free. Just remember to clean it.
All right. And we have one little bit of feedback. It's a voicemail from our old friend and yours, Aaron Butler. Let's see what he has to say over on our I am 559 I am Opie voicemail.
Only thing I can come up with, kind of harkening back to the shape deposit box idea, is two-part key. Also using a constantly changing number like a key fob type, so that the manufacturer will be required to own one key and build the second key to the government specification. So if the government would have half the key at all times, the vendor would have the other half. So if Bob proposed himself got a subpoena, or excuse me, a search warrant to unlock it, then they would contact the vendor and say, look, this phone has this software that you own, and I have a valid search warrant from the U.S. government. You just supply me my half of the key. They take that half of the key, they give it to the government, and then when the government plugs that key in with their key, it works for a X number of time, or another number of time, or unlocks for one instance, or whatever like that. That's the only way I can do it, or that's good. Anyway, for what it's worth, Mark, feel free to play this or not play this. I just thought it was, as I was finishing listening to the show, that was the only way I could think that it might possibly work. Where prevent the government from getting into it anytime they wanted, prevent the vendor, the creator, from getting into it anytime they wanted. With this glimmer of security still person that owns the data that was. Anyway, love the show. Talk to you later.
Okay, that's actually a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
If you trust the government. That's the if.
You know, I came up with another idea just listening to him talk, and that is the government could keep our passwords and we could rent them from them for some type of annual subscription or monthly subscription. You know, it's like if you want to have anything secure on the web, you have to rent a password from us. And, you know, every time you pay your fee, you get a valid password. And I don't know, I think that might work too.
Yeah, a little part of me just died inside. Thanks, Steph.
Hey, the sad part is how legitimate does that sound?
To respond to that would be to elevate it to a level above what it deserves. So we're just going to move on.
Okay.
There have been people talking about the two-part keys, between the manufacturer. That actually would not fit the Feinstein. It was Feinstein, right? No, it wasn't Feinstein. Who was it? Anyway, it would.
Yeah, she was one of them.
Okay, it wouldn't fit that law, because that law says that every person down the line has to be able to do it at any point. Personally, if you're going to do this, if we decide that we need a digital search warrant, the manufacturer is the way to go. And I like the idea of the manufacturer. You don't really need the two-part key. You just need a search warrant. You need a legal document signed by a judge, and that would make me okay with it. But that would mean changing the law, because the current law doesn't allow for that. So we would need a law, and that's what the Senate is trying to do. They're trying to find a law that allows for a digital search warrant. And in that case, You then have to trust the government to follow their own rules, which a lot of Americans don't trust that. I won't say whether I do or not. And then you have to trust the manufacturer to keep that secure, which history has proven is not going to happen.
Right.
So you're elevating, you're depending on a lot of trust there, and you're expecting people who are only encrypting their devices because they don't have trust in the first place to do it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, what else can you say? We already badgered that one pretty hard, 2 weeks ago.
And you didn't like my comments. So.
All right, so let's go on now to we got a couple of things here about the topic of this work. It's a question we still get on a regular basis. How can I make money doing this stuff that I love? Not just Linux in general, but open source. You don't have to sell your soul to corporate America to make money. It's true. A new open source jobs report shows that things are looking good for making money in the open source world, which people have often said can't be done.
Yeah, they just to kind of hit some of the highlights. Employers are seeking open source talent. 87% say it's hard to find, which if you have open source talent, that means you can kind of command a premium because it's so hard to find. 58% of managers are looking for DevOps. So, if you are some type of a developer, 86% of open source pros agree that knowing open source has advanced their careers, but here's one of the caveats. Only 2% say money and perks are the best part of the job. So I think this goes in with, you're doing your passion. You're not just collecting a paycheck, but you're involved in the development. You have ownership in the product. So then it becomes not about the money. It becomes about doing what you love, and that makes it more satisfying. 50% of open source pros, they believe that cloud type skills are the top. So, virtualization, containers, VMs, stuff like that. Those are just a couple of the highlights. I mean, there's a whole lot more, but so, I mean, what do you think, Chris? Good time to be in open source, or just, get your Microsoft certs and bring home the bacon?
Well, that's kind of a mixed bag there, but I would definitely agree that being involved in the open source community would definitely help bolster your career, especially if you're any form of a programmer, a developer. That's the time. The time is right for those people. The hardware experts, they're starting to get phased out, or downsized, I guess would be a better way, not phased out. They're being downsized because everything's going virtual, and if you don't know it, you can't do anything about it.
I've been saying for a decade that what will make open source win is the cost-free nature of it, not the free speech nature of it.
Exactly.
And that's what's happening. Businesses, ever pressed to squeeze more dollars out of their product, are relying on the freeness, the cost-free nature of open source, and so they're building platforms. OpenStack being a great example of it. They're built. Amazon, right, has built their whole thing on largely open source stuff, not because of Stallman's principles, but because it didn't cost them anything. And so we now have more and more people building entire infrastructures on these open source platforms, not because of some idealistic campaign, but because it didn't cost them anything to do it. I don't really care what the reason is. The end result is that 51% of people surveyed say that they need people who know how to work with these open source products. So open source has won, not on the ideals, but on the practicality of it. Either way, they won.
Yeah, and that's what all of us have been hoping for. At least, and the people I've always talked to, the free beer aspect is great. That's usually getting people in the door, but it's then getting them to believe, about the freeness after the fact. So maybe this is the start of that pill going down of, let's have freeness in the open, or not just freeness as in free beer, but freeness as a policy now.
Yeah, it may or may not be true that information wants to be free, but it is always true that businesses want to make money.
Oh yeah, definitely. The less they can pay, the more that they can give themselves in bonuses. That rule is probably older than business. Businesses said, hey, let's make money following this rule. And
Yeah, and dovetailing with that, an admittedly biased source, Linux.com, says over the next 6 months, open source jobs are going to increase.
yeah, I think, of course you would expect Linux.com to say that open source jobs are going to increase, but I think it's borne out because you can kind of go and see some of the highlights from their 2015 jobs report and see that the 2016 is even rosier. And so, and one of the cool things about open source still today, although you could say that it's not quite as easy as it has been in the past, you can get involved in the communities and you can do things to get experience with the projects and the software without having a job. And, it's not like you need, like in the old days, if you didn't work in the IT department of some company, you had to basically wire your garage and have like 20 different computers running 8 or 9 different versions of Windows and this domain controller and that email server and all this kind of stuff so that you could understand what would be required of you in a business environment. But now, with VMs in the cloud, Amazon Web Services or Pico Web Service, Microsoft, Google, OpenStack, Ubuntu or whatever, you can spin up these VMs in no time flat. You can install applications and you can see the exact same application that would be running in a business world. And you can say, okay, what would I need to do in a business world? Okay, I would need to be able to open up ports in a firewall to let this program work. Well, what ports does this program use? How do I need to configure the firewall? What tweaks do I need to make with this program so that it plays well with Exchange or whatever? And you can start doing that, and you can get these experiences without having the job to land you a job in the open source field. Might not be easy, but it's doable if you want to put the work in.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those things where it's going to take time and effort, but it'll be worth it when you get done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've just realized that both of these articles that we've talked here are both talking about the same survey, the 2015 Open Source Foundation survey. But I want to highlight this paragraph from Linux.com. It says, this year's Linux Foundation and DiceJobs.com job surveys included more than 400 hiring managers, so it's a small sample group, at corporations, small and medium businesses, government organizations, and staffing agencies. So there's a wide variety here, and it's not government is hiring it or small businesses, or everybody says that they need people who know how to work these infrastructure technologies because they have become infrastructure. They're as important now as electricity is to the way the modern computing platform works, and that's a win. Linus has won.
Or at least his philosophies have. Linux itself hasn't, but Linus's philosophies have.
Right. I'm not even sure I want to go there, but I'm going to. I would posit that Linus Torvalds' practical approach to something that doesn't cost anything and works has triumphed over Richard Stallman's pie in the sky approach to empirical or not empirical, but what's the word I'm looking for? To philosophy over practicality. It has lost. Now, as I've gone on record as saying before, I think we needed both of them. I think one, they're both oars that row the boat forward. But in the end, freeness became more important than freedom, and practicality won over philosophy. And I think that's always going to be the case. But this was a really good litmus test study. We put these two things together for roughly the same amount of time in roughly the same environment, and the wear mohair clothes and drive leaf-eating vehicles was superseded by something that's good enough and doesn't cost anything.
Right.
Well, and also, actually, Stallman came first because they first used Linux as, to put in the GNU / it was just GNU, and Herd is still in beta, and they were kind of betas at about the same time, and Linux is up to version, I don't know, 729 R6 v2.7, and Herd is still 0.098 or whatever. So, and even if you want to take the super long view and say the game's not over yet, well, at the halfway point or the first turn or whatever, definitely Linux has far exceeded Herd. But, you could make the argument that it wouldn't have been possible without it. And again, you can do whatever you want to with it, and that flexibility and that scalability is really what makes it the thing that made open source possible.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm processing these. We've got several different articles here. They all point back to that same survey. So it was different reporting about the same thing. So it's just it's the same point there. And what I'm reading here as I'm looking through it is this isn't Linux. It's open source.
Right.
And that's different. Very different. In fact, one of the big complaints from Stallman and his posse is that the Linux kernel isn't open source enough. There's, the binary compiled blobs in there. There's data in there that isn't open. The kernel and the development of the kernel is open, but the kernel that you download in your OS is not fully open. There are parts of it that are open and parts of it that are not open. And is that hybrid approach, that willingness to compromise between open and not open, is the difference between the Linux kernel being installed all over the world and the Herd kernel being on its third decade of beta.
Right. Well, and it's the difference between, I would say academic and usefulness too. I think Herd is an academically thing, and Linux, and the Linux kernel is an actual trial by fire. Now it works. Let's keep going.
Yeah, and Linus Torvalds is regularly plastered for being a jerk and being a totalitarian dictator. But he's a dictator who compromises when it's the best thing for the product. Stallman, and please don't think I'm dissing Stallman. I really respect the man for his principles, for his stand on his principles, but his principles don't stand up to the light of day, as we're seeing here, because when you refuse to compromise, that almost always means you also refuse to progress. Progress is by definition a series of compromises. And the open source community, fortunately, as a whole, followed the lead of Linus Torvalds into a compromise way to get something that's good enough. They're not interested in perfect. They're interested in good enough. They're interested in solid. They're interested in functional. And oftentimes, to get functional, you have to compromise principle. Now, I sound like I'm here saying, kids, compromise your morals at every turn, and life will go grand. You have to make educated choices as to when is the right time to let some of your principles slip. Now, that just having said that, it doesn't sound like a lesson I would want to teach my children. Yeah, just stick to your principles, except when you can get ahead without them. That's kind of what I just said, but it's also kind of true that there are some times when you have to back off. You got to pick your battles, and Linus Torvalds has been excellent at picking his battles. And he will pick a hill, and he will die on that hill, and he will fight, and he'll say this far, no farther. And other times he'll say, meh, that's fine, go ahead. And it's all for the good of the product, and not necessarily the good of the idea or the ideal.
Right.
And it's a different ideal. His ideal isn't photons want to be free, and electrons and neutrons and quasars and any other subatomic particle you want to name. His ideal is, I want something that works. What is the best tool? I don't want to spend all of my time machining a brand new bit. It's like the episode of Seinfeld with the a-hole type screwdriver, whenever they've already got Phillips and slot and Torx and all these other things. I'll just take one of those, and hey, I might have to make a new size, but I already have the infrastructure is already there for me to use this tool. I don't have to build a totally new infrastructure. And that's what the GNU project is having to do, and that's why it's not going anywhere. Because somebody comes out with brand new hardware, well, they spend all their time working to develop open source stuff for this stuff, and by the time it comes out, it's obsolete and nobody wants it. Versus, hey, this works, let's get it going. so we'll be ready for what comes out tomorrow.
It's just a different design model, and you can argue about what's better, but you can't argue about what's more successful.
Right.
I would agree with that statement.
Yeah.
And and here's the thing, that people who are against open source and say you guys are just a puff piece for open source. Well, here's the thing, it's like, because everybody will look at Red Hat, they're $1 billion company, and they're like, well, name another $1 billion open source company. You can't. Well, it turns out there's a lot. Like Facebook. Anybody ever heard of Facebook? They're
Amazon.
like the largest open source company ever, and so they don't make millions or billions like Microsoft or Apple does. But even in Microsoft and even in Apple, you have people who are employed using open source technologies. So the thing is, there might not be a company for containers or docs or whatever, but somebody who has those skills goes to work for this other company. And that's where the open source job market is. The developers who work, a lot of times they're employed by other companies and they help develop this product. So the jobs are out there. Things are moving in this direction. You don't have to know any open source and you can make a fine living in the technology sector. You can know nothing but open source and make a fine living in the technology sector. You can pick the best of both, pick one field or the other and some from each, and you can make a fine living in the technology sector. It's sort of like, it's almost to the point of saying, do you want to drive a Ford or a Chevy? Or maybe a better distinction would be, do you want to drive an electric car, a hybrid car, or a gas-only car? All three are viable now. Some things gas is much better for, some things electric is much better for. The hybrid seems to be the best of both worlds.
And you were talking about you don't need any open source. I am a quasi expert in open source. At least I come here every week and run my mouth as though I am. But in my day job, I use none. I'm not allowed to. My entire paycheck, the way I support my family, is not only not open source, it's openly anti-open source.
Yep.
And so, I'm living a double life. I'm an open source advocate who makes his money using closed source products. And Chris, I would wager that you're probably in the same boat.
Oh yeah, yeah. The chance of me getting anything pushed up through that's open source, while is doable, it's I think it'd be easier to do some Congress enacting versus bringing something totally. And the main reason it seems to be not just the fact that it's open source; it's the fact that there's no one to call when it breaks down.
Right. That's the argument everybody always says. But at the same time, they're hiring an entire stable of people who are there to make sure it doesn't break down. I've always thought that's the most specious argument, but it's also the most common argument. Where I work, for example, there are multiple servers that run Unix, so they're paying for Unix.
Wow.
When I'm pretty sure they could do everything they need to do on Linux. I don't know for sure, but I bet that there's probably 99.999% compatibility between Linux and Unix there for the things that they need. But for that same reason, nobody ever went out of business or nobody ever got fired by paying for a multi-million-dollar contract for support, because then as long as you've got somebody, it's not somebody you can call that when it breaks, it's somebody you can blame when it breaks. And that's the important thing.
That too. That definitely works too. It's interesting. Like just the other day when I asked if I could, because we have a list of approved software for our company, and I noticed GIMP was on it, surprisingly, and I asked, "Can I have it?" And I had to go through not a lot of headache to get it, but it was like, really? I have to sign this paperwork. I have to watch this tutorial video about open source software in our environment, and yeah, it was. I was like, this is kind of strange, but okay.
You're like, you want me to tell you the 25 things I noticed in that video that were wrong? Is that why I'm watching it?
And of course, the way I handled that same problem
I
was
didn't say that.
I just used portable apps and put it on my thumb drive, and it's not on their computer, and I didn't have to watch the video.
But that's not allowed in my environment. No thumb drives, no nothing. Yeah, it's locked down. Even as a tech, it's locked down.
Yeah, in my company, we can bring a thumb drive, but as soon as you plug it in, it gets encrypted, or it's read only, and that's fine. That actually works really well for me. I think that's a reasonable compromise. But anyway, the point there being, as much as I am an advocate of open source, I am not a zealot of open source. I look for, in fact, a group I helped start in Texas was called the Strategic Open Source Initiative. The key there being use open source when it's strategic, when it's appropriate, when it's best. If sometimes the best tool for you is a closed source product, which many times is the case, then I'm not going to advocate for you to use an open product just for my principles. Be strategic about it, and then you will be successful. So a strategic open source initiative is also a successful open source initiative. If you forego the strategy part of it and just open source everywhere just because you're doomed to, well, I'm not going to say you're doomed to failure. You're certainly pushing up a hill that you didn't really need to.
I would not disagree with that.
Yeah. And and I sit here in front of me looking at 3 Windows laptops and a Linux laptop. In my own world, Windows supersedes Linux for podcasting because the tools that I need to use are better than Windows. Sorry, they just are. And I would rather,
well,
I would wish they
weren't,
but they are. Exactly. That's the thing. It's the drivers that make the difference. And I wish it weren't the case, but it wouldn't be strategic of me to go all open source, just because then I would not be able to do my job as easily or as effectively. I'd get it done. I know podcasters who run an all open source product, and they work harder to be as effective as I am running Windows. I just, I skip that problem by buying Windows. And I'm okay with that. And the fact is, every computer you buy probably came with a Windows license, whether you wanted it or not. You already bought it. You might as well use it.
Yeah. You have a tool. There's no sense throwing out this tool just because you don't like the brand. Although there are people who do that. I refuse to use that hammer because it's a Stanley and I only use Craftsman. I'm not going to get in your car because it's a Ford and I only like Chevy or whatever. And those people exist. And if that's the person you want to be, hey, more power to you. Be it. But where does that get us? Whenever you bash something simply because of the brand without knowing whether it is good or not, where does that get us? Anywhere productive? I would hypothesize nowhere productive. I might be mistaken, but that would be my guess.
My youngest daughter is approaching the age at which I will buy her a cell phone, her first cell phone. And she asked me the other day if I would buy her an iPhone. And I said, no, honey, I will never buy you an Apple product. And she said, well, but why? I said, because I don't like the way the company treats its customers, and I don't like the way they do their business. I actually think their products are pretty outstanding in a lot of ways, but I don't like the way the company treats their customers. Therefore, I refuse to be a customer of their company. Is that a hardline stance? Yes, but it's a well-reasoned hardline stance. It's because I don't want to stand in line to pay money to get dumped on. And in my experience, that's the way Apple handles their customers. True, it's also the way Microsoft handles their customers, which is why I have very little dealings with Microsoft whenever possible. Yes, I use their products, but I try not to deal with the company. So what she said, so do you hate Apple? I said, no, I don't hate Apple. I don't hate their products. I just don't want to be a customer. And when you're spending your own money, if you want to buy an iPhone, you go right ahead. But as long as it's coming out of my wallet, it's not going to be an Apple product. So, I have principles as well, and some of them may be just as closed-minded as, people saying I'm not going to use open source because I don't trust it. I don't want to be an eye sheep. I just refuse to do it.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And and hey, from the open source point of view, you're going to lock her in young in the open source Google community. She's going to have everything set up for Google, and then so she's not going to want an iPhone because all of her stuff is integrated with Google Apps.
There is that, absolutely.
You brainwashing. Somebody should call CPS right now.
Isn't that a quick aside there?
Yep.
Isn't
Just a little bit.
95% of parenting brainwashing? That's what we do. That's what we are charged with doing as parents. We brainwash our children. This is the way we do things. This is what we believe. It's indoctrination. Every bit of my exchange of my faith between myself and my child is pure indoctrination for the first 8 years. Maybe longer than that. And then they get to make their own decisions. And if they decide to go Buddhist, then they will have made an informed choice because I will tell them what I believe and why. And the same is true for everything else. I'm indoctrinating my children not to hate black people. That's indoctrination. That is brainwashing. I think it's a good kind of brainwashing, but it's the one I'm choosing to do.
Yeah, it's called society. If the majority agrees with it, it's called brainwashing if the majority doesn't agree with it. The process and the terms are the exact same. It's just, the victors get to write the history books.
Yeah, and that was a discussion we had just today. I coming out of a restaurant, there was an old black gentleman dressed to the nines, wearing like a purple suit and a pimp hat. And I slapped him on the shoulder and said, "Sir, you are rocking that hat. I love it." And it was I'm a big boisterous guy. I have conversations like that, and my wife took note of his wife's reaction to it. She did not take it well. She thought I was making fun of the man. I wasn't. I was complimenting him on the fact that he looked fly, and I wished I could pull off a purple suit and a hat like he was wearing, but I just can't make it work. And the man, he seemed to be like he took it well, but his wife didn't, and so that spawned this conversation between our children. And I told her, I said, no matter what you might think. And I'm going to say they were in their late 70s, 80s, maybe older, this couple. And I said, no matter what you might think, you can never understand what it was like for those people growing up black in the South. And I may have crossed a line there completely, trying to be a good guy, trying to spread some joy to my neighbor. I may have caused them pain or fear. This big white dude clapped him on the shoulder. That may have been a fearful moment for him, and I didn't think about it. And and so the whole point there is that we all indoctrinate our children in different ways, and that fostered that discussion. And I had to tell them that I may have just stepped on that man's culture unwillingly, and you got to be sensitive to that stuff. You got to be aware of it. You got to know that not everybody's culture, even if you grew up in the same town in the same generation, you probably didn't have the same experience, and you can't know what their culture was. And the fact that you said indoctrination brought me to that. Parenting is indoctrination. It is brainwashing. So anyway, total aside.
Isn't that amazing, the conversations we have talking about the open source jobs report?
Wow, talk about rabbit holing this week, but that's okay.
Well, I think they're all related because we've been talking about principles and picking the hill you're going to die on, and picking the battles you're going to fight, and the open source versus closed source is just as militant as the white versus black in some circles. It is.
Yeah. Oh, it's just like the browser wars not too long ago. Same thing.
Yeah, the one and sadly, my beloved Firefox just gave up the browser wars.
Every time, man, I don't know what to do. I don't want to drink the Google Kool-Aid all the way just because I don't like Chrome, and it's an emotional not like. There's really no technical reason. I don't like IE because Microsoft does not know how to make a non-sucky browser. They don't even know how to license other people's browser code and make it non-suckier. So, I guess I could try Opera, Safari. I prefer not to use Apple products.
Don't even try Safari on Windows. Just don't.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'll try Vivaldi. I've heard lots of good things about that browser.
That's what I was just going to bring up. I was like, has anyone even tried it?
I downloaded it.
I'm friends with the developer on LinkedIn.
That's as far as I can go. It's on my system. I have an icon for it. That's as far as I can go.
Guess
Yeah.
what? I'm downloading it now just to play with it tonight.
I want to,
Just
whenever we
because I
come
can.
back from when we come back from the break, I want to try to get someone from Vivaldi on the podcast.
All right. So let's move on to a little bit of tech news, and this is, actually in line with what we were just talking about. It's sometimes hard, it's often hard, to get people to try the latest and greatest of whatever it is. A la Microsoft, their biggest competitor is their 10-year-old product. And Seth has an article here from The Verge talking about how Google has the same problem. Their biggest Android competitor is their old products.
Well, and actually, their old products are killing them because Marshmallow, which is the current version of, and one of the reasons this article came out is just within a couple of days, Google's going to be highlighting what's going to be coming up on their next version of Android in their developers conference.
Yeah.
But Marshmallow, their latest and greatest that came out last year, not yesterday, not last week, not last month, last year, early in the year, has a whopping 7.5% of the Android installs, whereas Lollipop, which was the year before that, was over 35%, and KitKat, which has been a couple of years ago, is 32%. Jelly Bean, all the way down to Gingerbread.
Yeah, you're not going back. Sorry to interrupt. You're not going back far enough, Seth. Lollipop was 4 years old. KitKat was like 6 years old, and those two combined have over half the market.
Was it that far?
Yeah.
5 and 6.
Yeah, Marshmallow is almost 2 years old. Lollipop was around about a year and a half before Marshmallow came out, and KitKat was around almost 2 years before Lollipop came out.
Yeah, 2013 was KitKat, and Jelly Bean was 2012.
So 6 years, 4 years ago. Okay, I was thinking more like 6 years ago, but okay, 4 years ago.
Yeah, and even Gingerbread, is 2.2, and I know that there's got to at least be 1% of 1.6, which was what, Froyo, I think?
Yes.
That was really the first one that didn't totally suck, in my humble opinion, was 1.6, and it's still out there. So, and of course, it's easy to blame Google, but at the same time, this is not Google's fault. These are the hand makers who bundle whatever version came with their phone, or whatever version was out there and they wanted to use, and then they're not going to push an OS update for their phone. They want you to buy another phone.
Exactly.
Because cell phones have become a commodity now, almost a staple, just something you use and throw away, not an investment. And so why would I want to take the time to invest in something whenever instead I can make you buy another one?
Yeah, if you're Motorola, you don't want to update your Droid. You want people to buy your new phone.
Right.
Why in the world would you want to give Apple does the same thing? They you can't push the latest iOS on an old device. That would be market suicide. That would be a dumb thing. And so you get this problem, and again, going back to Microsoft, they're having the same problem with XP. People aren't upgrading, and so ancient bug fixes are out there, and Google has sort of made the choice not to update that old stuff. And so if you're walking around with a Jelly Bean, 20% of the people in the world are, you're walking around with bugs that have not been fixed and have no intention of being fixed.
Unless you root and use something else.
If that something else can even be supported. Exactly. There's some points where you can't even go. Some processors just won't go. So it's a problem with lasting hardware in a disposable world. I buy phones every 3 to 5 years, and I'm a fairly rapid adopter. 3 years, really. 5 years is a long time for me to keep a phone. Every 3 years, I'm going to buy a new phone, and that's actually fairly rapid. A lot of people keep them 4 or 5 years because why not? They still make phone calls. They still play Flappy Bird. Why do you need to upgrade?
Yeah, well, and sometimes some app gets pulled from the store, and if you upgrade to a newer thing, you can't get it back. So you have to stay with the old one. But I was thinking about this as I was reading this article, and what do y'all think has a possible fix? What if Google in the Play Store put an app that was update to Marshmallow or whatever, where a user, if they were so adventurous, could then go and install that app, and that app would then update the underlying OS. Would that be doable from Google's perspective?
I don't think so.
I'm just curious.
It's
You don't think so?
It's far too
Yeah,
low
no.
level for that. I don't think it would be possible to do that at the app layer.
They can get close. I don't think they can get to the root, the base layer though. That's like, that'd be like, can you format and reinstall Windows without losing anything? That would be the similar process there for Windows versus phone, or computer versus phone.
Well, I mean, if you're,
You,
I guess if
you
your
could come
computer was
close,
big enough,
but
you
I don't
could.
think you could do it perfectly.
So,
Chris,
it
is there
has
an
to be
axe
perfect.
murderer outside your window, Chris? I just heard a child screaming. Is everything okay? Nobody's dead, are they?
No one's dead. Just the
Okay.
neighbor kids having fun.
Okay. Fun and death sound a lot alike sometimes.
They do.
They really
Especially
do.
with my neighbor kids.
I will hear my children often. Is that a laugh or a cry? I'm not really sure. Was that a good scream or a bad scream? Do I need to get up off my comfy couch? Well, I haven't heard any. Doesn't sound like anybody's bawling. Okay, I'm just gonna let that one go.
Yep, I do that a lot.
If it was serious, they'll do it again louder.
Yep, that's right.
Of course,
That's
sometimes if it was fun, they'll do it again louder
That's
too.
true,
So
too.
that doesn't necessarily work.
So along this thread of not updating and legacy being your biggest problem, Intel has decided that they're just not going to play that game anymore. They're done with Atom. They're just over it. They couldn't compete.
Huh.
They couldn't keep up. They're done. Not only that, but they're laying off like 10% of their workforce. Bad days ahead for Intel.
Yeah. They're basically exiting the smartphone and the phablet and the small tablet market. So they're concentrating. Of course, they're like the thing for servers and high-end desktops and the like desktop replacement tablet market. But yeah, so they've sunk basically over $10 billion in the last few years trying to build an infrastructure for the smartphone market, but it has done dwindling results. Basically, their loss, the amount of money they spend versus their return has hung about the same. Unfortunately, they've been making less money, so their losses have been increasing, and they've just decided to exit. Of course, this could be a good thing for the smartphone market because they exited it once before, right before the iPhone came out and exploded the smartphone market. So now maybe Intel's abandoning the smartphone processor market means that it's going to explode with some revolutionary new feature. So maybe this is a harbinger for good rather than evil. But yeah, Intel is saying bye-bye to the smartphone processor market.
That doesn't surprise me though. Their processors were never mobile ready. They were always too hot, or you know what I mean? There was always a problem with it.
Well, the Intel x86 infrastructure that Intel helped pioneer is all about it's the kitchen sink processor.
Yep.
Everything you need is there. ARM is completely the other way around. It's the minimalist processor, RISC versus CISC. It's an entirely different design ethos, and I think that you can't have both ethoses exist in the same company. And that's the problem. You have to go all in on one or the other. And Intel isn't going to give up the x86 golden goose. Even though there's lots of reason to maybe abandon that in the next decade, you could still milk that cow for a decade. And so they tried to have the one side, the left hand, stripping things down and the right hand building things up. And I just don't think you can do that as a company. I think this was a smart move. And they've lost $10 billion. The amazing thing is that they had $10 billion to lose over the last 3 years. But leave ARM to the ARM people and leave x86 to the x86 people. But where you run into there is what do you do when nobody wants x86 anymore? So you have a problem there as well, and I get why Intel's doing that, but I also understand why they cut it. It's two different mindsets, and I don't think they can both exist in the same company.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
know,
think so either.
the thing is, though, as everybody moves to the cloud, that actually opens up a bigger market for them because, of course, the consumer needs less and less powerful desktop because the smartphones are getting smarter. But as more and more stuff goes web-based, well, that web is just a network of huge freaking servers running,
Yep.
8,000 core multi-terawatt processing power that's Intel's bread and butter. So yes, they're losing the numerically superior, cheaper chips, but at the same time, they're focusing better on the all-powerful, godlike master computing unit chips.
Right. So let me just give a little bit of a history lesson there. Early on in the early days of coding, when memory was more expensive than programmers, when it cost more to add a kilobyte of RAM than to pay a coder for a year, it was very important that you do the minimum number of steps possible to perform an action.
Mm-hmm.
Intel rose to that challenge and said, we'll just put everything in silicon. You want an XOR. You want to take everything and flip it. Instead of writing a multi-step process to do that will burn RAM and burn cycles, we'll just make a function for that. And all you have to do is say XOR this number, and it's in the chip, and it's lightning fast. And over time, they just kept adding on. We also want this feature, and we want this. We want the trusted computing module. What is it? TPM, trusted platform, something. I can't remember what it. Basically,
like that, yeah.
Encryption on the chip. And Intel's like, all right, we'll just build that because encryption's hard. Encryption takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of processing power. Let's just throw that right on the chip. So over time, the chip has gotten more complicated and does more, but that saves on everything else. Well, now we're in a world where RAM is cheap and cycle time is cheap. We can run these things in the gigahertz range instead of the megahertz range. So cycle times are kilohertz, by golly. Back in the day, they were running it at kilohertz. So
and we can have more chip or more processors
more cores,
per chip.
Right. So the ARM infrastructure is stripped down. The chip is just basic life support. You've got to do everything on your own. So to do the same XORing on an ARM chip, and don't write me emails. I know this may be wrong. I'm simplifying it for people who don't understand, as well as you do, Internet nerd. To XOR something, you may have to do 15 steps as opposed to on an ARM chip, as opposed to one step in an Intel chip. But we're running at multi-core gigahertz processors. Those 15 steps still take a fraction of a second. So that's why ARM can do what it does now. And because you've stripped down the chip, much better battery life, much lower power, much lower heat. You don't need a cooling fan on an ARM chip pretty much ever because it's doing less. It's doing less more often instead of doing more less often. And that works well in the mobile market. Where it doesn't work, as Seth said, is when you really need to crunch big numbers. You still need the big chip to do that. And so I think Intel is just seeding that and say, fine, we're okay with powering the world's data centers. That's not a bad place to be.
Yeah,
well, no, because they'll never lose.
And also, going back to you need the weaker chip, that's one of the reasons that the apps, the rise of the app, rather than have a program that can do 17 different things, you now have 17 separate apps on your phone that can only do one thing each. So you're not complicating the processor's life by getting all of these functions ready to go. You're like, cue this function, this is the one I want. And then if you want some other function, you launch some other app, and so it goes, oh wait, no, I don't need that function, I need this one. So yeah, the Intel's chip is not that, and so they can't. You need a totally different 20 cents or paradigm, in order to excel at the different functions.
So I think this is a smart business move to say, we're okay with just $1 trillion market. We'll just take that, and we're okay with it.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't just take that?
Right.
Not everybody gets to drive a Bentley. Not everybody needs to own an Intel. Wouldn't that be a great marketing slogan?
And I think Microsoft needs to do that and needs to abandon the mobile. I think they just need to say, we're the Intel software platform. We'll use it on heavy laptops and we'll use it on servers and we're fine. Except that, oops, darn it, Linux outnumbers them on the servers. So then all they've got is the heavy laptop, which
Yep.
nobody's using anymore. Oops.
Yep.
There's a problem there, isn't there?
Yeah,
Yep.
they kind of got pushed out.
Failure to adapt. Anything else about that, guys, before we move along?
I think we can move.
All right. Intel says goodbye to mobile, and I own at least 2 Atom chips in my house right now. They weren't huge, but they were. If you had a small fanless processor on a PC, you probably had an Atom chip in it.
My current favorite computing device, it runs on Atom.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on now to because Mark loves numbers. Seth has some ransomware numbers for us.
Yes,
Ooh.
according to this Softpedia news story, Kaspersky's Q1 IT threat evaluation report represents a 14% increase in ransomware. 14%, the sky is falling. Until you go to the article, and that means they've detected 2,900 new ransomware variants. Not necessarily that there was more of them than before, it's just there's a greater number of variants as the ransomware kits make their round through the, we talked, was it last week or a couple of weeks ago when we talked about the big business of the malware IT field. So, of course there's going to be more variants because everybody's got to differentiate themselves. So Kaspersky says that their malware database now includes about 15,000 ransomware modifications. And so, of course, during the past 3 months, that's 20% of its entire database. Now, again, back in the day, when it was a race between the virus writers and the AV writers, they would go in and change just one line of code with a comment or something to give it a new signature. There was nothing separate about the virus. They needed to bypass the signature. That could be what a lot of these detections are. It might not necessarily be anything new. It's just a little different thing to try to bypass that low bar of security. So anyway, any thoughts, guys?
Ransomware is the new gold mine.
It is.
And because encryption is so good, and because it's so easy to do, and open source has made it cost nothing, you can cobble together a series of open source tools that will encrypt somebody's information without their permission. And time after time, we're seeing people just having to pay up. Their only choice is pay up.
Oh, I just had a thought.
Uh-oh.
This kind of ties back in with Aaron's comment and our discussion from before. If somebody writes cryptoware, they would then be breaking the law by not providing the encryption key to the government. So that's yet another thing they can be busted for. So
Yes, because
There you go.
because
that's a good benefit of the law.
passing new laws always stops criminals every time.
It's just, in a lot of ways, the technology is evolving faster than the law is. Again, I would be totally against the law, but one good thing is it gives you then a law to go after them with. It might be hard to figure out which law they broke based on our code written for the telegraph, but we could get them for this law.
Okay.
Anyway.
It's like going after Al Capone on tax evasion.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, hey,
But we did it. We
worked.
did it. So
I just thought of it, I don't know if you saw my screen flash when that lightning hit, but I wanted to share.
So Chris, any thoughts on ransomware?
yeah, it's the new golden child. We'll figure out a way to stop it eventually, and then it'll go away just like everything else has, and something else will come up.
Will
I
we?
think
How do you stop it other than users not being stupid? And that's hard.
Yeah, that's going to be the biggest problem. I don't know how to stop it. Otherwise, I'd make $1 million or more. But I think what's going to happen. I mean, we had the ransomware is the current one, but remember the ones that would lock out your computer, so you would have to pay with what was it, Money Pack, to because it would put a screen over your whole a pop up over your whole screen. And you couldn't get to anything. Did you ever see those?
I was aware that they existed.
Yeah,
Okay.
One of those actually rescued me from one of the crappiest jobs I've ever had. So
there you go.
Rest,
Uh,
because
I need
it
to
was
hear
easy.
that story.
Okay, my brother, this had, and we even did a story about the guy who had it on his screen, and it was like, we found child porn
Right,
in
and he
computers, so he
reported
wouldn't turn himself in. But my brother had the same thing happen to him, and so he calls me. Well, I had been waiting on my travel I was going around to different Holiday Inns, updating their computer system, reservation system overnight and stuff. So I was waiting because I had to be somewhere that night and had yet to get things at like noon. I went to my brother's shop and fixed this. They're trivially. It was trivial. It was very easy to
Trivially.
fix. Trivial, yeah. My lips won't function. It was pretty easy to fix, and but while I was there working with him, they sent me an email and they called me and said, "Oh, well, you didn't send me an email." And finally they did, and they fired me for not traveling, and I was okay with that because they were the worst managers I've ever had the displeasure of knowing in my entire life. But anyway, it saved me having that lockout screen. Actually saved me because I went to help my brother, and I wasn't around whenever the email came in to go to them. So
Your
how
brother
come it
owes
saved
you a
me.
job, is what you're saying.
Oh, no, I ended up getting a really great job after that. That was kind of in the works for. It just took a while for the recruiter and all the interviews to happen. But no, it just helped me. It gave me a great excuse to quit.
There you go.
So ransomware is bad. My company has recently, as a result of that, blocked all non-corporate mail servers, Gmail, Yahoo.
Yeah.
Just no, you can't go there. Before, people could check their personal mail, but because they were so scared of ransomware, and I don't think this was a bad choice. I think it was a fine thing for them to do. Not only are they, we deal only with people in the local Atlanta area and a few national companies, but nobody international. They're just blocking all mail from like Russia or China. It just can't get through. Again, I think that's a reasonable choice for my particular company, and they're taking a real big sledgehammer approach to this because they're scared of the damage that can be done by a well-meaning person clicking on a ransomware link.
Well, I mean, yeah, just look at what happened to that hospital in California that got hit twice.
Mm-hmm. Because their backup was encrypted. Oops.
Yeah, and even if you've done everything and everything is backed up and it's backed up in such a way that, think of the time it takes to restore that. If you have a huge database that you have to restore, I mean, you're losing money whenever you're out a lot of money. So even doing everything right, it can still take you time to recover. So that's what makes this so bad. It's not like a one-click, refresh the page and you're up and going. It's like, crap, turn it off, load the backup. Is the backup finished so that I can run this?
Valid?
And then is it valid, and put it on there and then test it and then reintegrate. Okay, did you find where it came from? So that becomes a long process when everything is done right. So yes, ransomware I think will be around for a while.
Yeah, and if you have a really big multi-function database, things can be changing literally by the millisecond. If you're Amazon, you don't have a database. You have a system of databases that are all interrelated, and to be able to shut all of that down and restore all of the, even if you've got backups, to be able to restore that is a big deal. And that's why people, it's just pay them. Just pay them. It's just easier. It's only 40 bitcoins. We can afford it. And even good IT departments can be left in a situation where it's not worth. It's going to cost more to fix it than it is to just pay the ransom, which is why I think we're going to see it on the rise. And it's really easy to get fished in by those things. And really, the only way around it is to be like the command line godfather there and hand type every link you ever go to. Never click a link in email. I'm not that good. The other choice is, if you're the IT department, you just don't give people links ever. It's just not an option. You're blocked. No soup for you.
But you can do everything right and visit a hacked web page.
It's true.
Yep.
Just because you went to the correct, you typed it in and you verified, and you had your wife come in with another set of eyes to make sure you didn't transpose letters, and then you hit enter. Well, guess what? The page you went to was broken into yesterday, and every fifth person who visits that from a new region of the country, that's how granular this stuff can be, gets hit. And so whenever your son went there, he didn't get hit, but you went there, you were the random number counter, and boom, you got hit. You did nothing wrong. Because when I was working at a school district, our web page, one of our web pages had got hacked, but it was so cool. I was really impressed with the people. It only presented the malware the first time that IP address went to that site. So the next time you came back to that same site, it was clean. And so it took a while to figure out what had happened and get around it. But, and that was, I guess, 5 or 6 years ago now. How much more complex can they be at dishing this stuff out selectively? So you can do everything right and still get hit with malware that it would take you as an individual the better part of a day to recover. Imagine if Amazon got hit with this. Could you imagine them not processing orders for 24 hours, not being able to access your Prime Video for 24 hours while they clean this up? Think of the money they would be losing. So it wouldn't be an option for them not to immediately pay, and hopefully they get their stuff back.
I hear you. It's scary, and it's one of those no-win situations. You can do everything right and still get screwed.
Pretty much. Yep. That's the way it works when you're out there on the wild, wild west internet.
Yep. All right, let's get off of that and move on to a happier subject. Seth, what happened this week in history?
Okay, this is another watershed moment in the history of information technology. May the 7th, 1952, the concept of the integrated circuit, the basis for all modern computers, is first published by Jeffrey W.A. Dummer. He was an English electrical pioneer. He foresees the fabrication of all electronic components of a circuit or system in a single block of semiconductor material, and he built several special function devices at Bell Labs and RCA before Jack Kilby, who is in a lot of circles known as the father of the integrated circuit, before he demonstrated a general purpose integrated circuit in 1958. So that happened this week in history, 1952. That makes it 64 years ago.
Marty, I slipped off my toilet and I hid my head on the tub, and when I woke up, I drew this. That's what that was. He drew the flux capacitor. That was a terrible impression. Yes, I know.
We'll let it go this time.
Yeah, I made him a Jewish grandpa. I don't know why. That's just how it happened.
I thought you were doing like Mario or Luigi. That's what it sounded like to me.
It's me, Mario.
I've got a cold. Actually, not a cold, allergies. So my voice isn't as dulcet as it should be. But anyway, that's a watershed moment. It truly is. Everything we have today, all these chips we're talking about are now laser carved out of single chips. And somebody had to think of that, and who knew?
I mean, could you imagine something to perform the number of calculations in your phone? Let's not even talk about your computer. Let's talk about your phone. Imagine using resistors or vacuum tubes. How many of those it would take to compute what your phone can do? You would have to have a computer house sitting next to your house.
It would be several inconveniently large buildings. Yes.
It would be. And so anyway, that's what this moment is. And we don't understand, especially people younger than us who, hold a computer in the size of their hand. We went to the moon on I think it was 16K, it might have been 64K of memory and a processing power that modern calculators can trash. But yeah, we took that to the moon, and unfortunately haven't been back since, but that would be a topic for another podcast. Versus this is the water. I mean, we couldn't have the life we live, whether that's good or bad, today without the integrated circuit.
Amen.
Yeah. Amen.
The transistor, the integrated circuit, they go hand in hand, and they are our world. And our grandchildren are going to be talking about some new technology that we don't know what it is yet. and saying our modern world couldn't happen without the quantum crystal or whatever, because we've
Or,
kind of reached the point. We've gone almost as far as we could go with transistors and integrated circuits. So something's going to have to take its place. I'm excited to see what that is.
a change in magnitude.
Yeah, there's
Let's
a
see it.
hipster in a garage working on that right now.
He probably already sold out the day before he invented it. He did an IPO and cashed out.
There you go. Maybe. Who knows?
Intel bought him and shut that project down because they want another decade on their chips.
All right, let's move on to the part of the show where I tell you how you can contact us. If you want to be like Aaron did and have your voicemail appear right here on this show, you can call 559-IAM-OP anywhere in the North American continent. That is a free call. Outside the North American continent, I don't know how much you pay for it. But make the call, leave a voicemail, we'll play it on the air. Or if you just want to send me a file, that works too. If you don't trust the Googles, you can just send me a file. And so once you can also go to our webpage and go to elementop.com, click the Contact Us button at the top of the page, fill out the form there, and let us know what you think, and we'll play it on the show. So we like hearing from you, and we appreciate knowing what you have to say. And so tell us what you think. Are we a bunch of windbags here? Probably. But tell us something else other than that. Tell us what you think. And no, Seth, I didn't forget your show closing spectacular. I just wanted to get that Contact Us thing right out there and out of the way. So, Seth, tell us, what do you have this week to lower my productivity so that you seem like a better hiring option?
Okay, you need sound to get the full effect of this website. But it is awesome. You go there, you click play.
He's lost it already.
It's just funny. I thought it was great. It is counting sheep.
Okay. You have to check it out. You have to see it to know what it is.
It's counting sheep, and it's awesome.
Seth is quietly hemorrhaging. He's laughing so hard. This is right up his alley.
It was very funny. I wasn't expecting it. I had a different site lined up that was gonna be freaking awesome, but it's been up and down all day, and it wasn't up last time I checked, so I went with this one.
I think if I use this link to go to sleep, the nightmares I would have as a result of it would far outweigh the fact that it put me to sleep.
And then thus you would be not very good in work the next day. You would not be productive, making me seem like a better hire.
There you go.
There you go. And that's how you do it.
And I have a link this week that it's not tech, it's just funny. It's a friendship pendant. It's the Star Trek communicator. It's two pendants that when you put together, it's a Star Trek communicator that says, "I have been and always shall be your friend." So if you have a geek buddy and you want to show that you're BFFs into the 24th century and beyond, you can get the Quantum Mechanics Star Trek Friendship Necklace.
Okay.
Wow, and I thought I was geeky playing D&D. I think you beat me. You trumped me out there, Mark.
Are you just mad that I haven't sent you half of it? Is that what it is?
Maybe. Just a little.
It's cool. Check it out. That's the whole thing. So that's it. That's it for the show. We'll see you next week because we're done for this episode of the GeekRant.
Later, taters.
Toodles.
All right, guys. I'm going to stop the broadcast because we have a super secret board meeting where we're going to take over the world, and that'll happen afterwards. So thanks for hanging out with us. See you later. Bye.